Supervisor Compton,
I
some
just
final comments?
forgot I have questions. I already made my comments. So on page 20 of 42, we have permit requirements for indoor cannabis nurseries. Why the paved and unpaved roads was that added in there? Because when I look at my nurseries, that would severely give preferential treatment to a few nurseries and eliminate every other nursery. So why did we say paved and unpaved roads?
Sure. And just to clarify, when we talk about nurseries, we're talking about the use of just the starter plants.
You're not talking about nurseries like greenhouse nurseries?
Yeah, so greenhouse would be the structure. Most nurseries are located in greenhouses, but your greenhouse could be growing.
Okay, so then my question still applies because there's only a few nurseries that are paved roads. Most of them are like DG or something.
Right. So this section, those standards came from the existing nursery specialty standards in Title 22.
So do we have to live by those? Because that pretty much knocks out every nursery in my district.
Your board could amend that as you see fit.
Well, I guess I would like an analysis on, I can go around, drive to every one of the 25 nurseries and see if there's already paved all the way there. But
Mr. McNulty?
I agree with Ms. Cummings that we can change that. It's an issue that will play into the environmental document, and I believe perhaps one of the reasons it was carried over was to deal with the potential for impacts associated with dust on roads. So.
Well, I think we need, traffic is going in and out of those nurseries if they're doing cut flowers or marijuana.
That's a good point. There's definitely a baseline use that generates a certain amount of dust, and that would need to be considered.
I think we just need to do an analysis because I had a nursery grower bring that up to me, and he said I wouldn't qualify, and it's one of the bigger nurseries. He said I wouldn't qualify. So I just see another thing that I didn't catch all along, but had caught because someone brought it up to me.
So your board, it sounds like maybe giving us direction to try and utilize the state CEQA exemption. So if your board wanted to eliminate or
I'm not saying I want to eliminate it. I think you need to do an analysis on if I do think there's benefit in going into nurseries in terms of the smell and negating the smell issue. So you just need to know what that impact is going to be. If you say no paved roads, that's going to eliminate 90% of the nurseries, which, okay, that's what people want to do, but.
So if we did use that state exemption,
I think we just need to find out.
All permits would have a discretionary review where we would look at the air impacts, dust, traffic.
I guess.
That's what I was thinking. So that if we do go that route and there is some lower level discretionary permit involved, they would look at the issue of whether or not the road needs to be paved.
Okay, but they would look at it. Well, so just like the previous discussion came up, they would look at that based on this use compared to the last use, not so. I mean,
exactly. They would look at what's going on now and what's proposed to happen, and they would make some comparison based on the use of the road.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not completely sure that we have given coherent direction to staff on all matters before us. And I am sure that at this hour of the day, we're not going to reconcile these details between the five of us. I don't think it's our job at this point to reconcile the details. But I think if we look at the major policy level things and some of the things that are going to cause staff the most amount of work before they present something, the modification of this as a public hearing draft to the Planning Commission is, first of all, are we going to direct them to try to take advantage of the state CEQA exemption as a way of shaping this document? However the specifications end up, that has its pros and cons. It puts certain activities into discretionary permits that weren't envisioned to go to discretionary permits. But I think, let me suggest the direction and see if colleagues agree that one piece of policy direction is we would like to see this ordinance crafted to try to take advantage of the state exemption and to minimize the burden of discretionary permits at every opportunity. Is that a fair way to do that?
I think we have thumbs up.
That in and of itself is going to. So let's agree that we've got that direction in the heading forward. For instance, the cap on the cap. I tend to think that a cap is going to be a lot of trouble, as I said. I think the uneven distribution of activity right now is largely California Valley, and if we are going to ban outdoor growing in our residential suburban, a lot of that goes away. And so I don't see that there's necessarily a distribution problem here. But I don't think we need to debate that here on this dais on this afternoon. But I would like to think that we would encourage the Planning Commission to give it their thoughtful consideration, and that we would be open to whatever recommendation they bring back as the majority of the Planning Commission. And we can see if it's a 3-2 recommendation, that's one thing. If it's a 5-0 recommendation, I just think we need to be open to considering it. Because, for instance, a couple of things that pop up here, setbacks. Maybe there's a setback that's different from for an outdoor grow from a residential use than if we have a cannabis cultivation going on outdoors, maybe the setback to adjacent residential uses is different than setback to adjacent commercial uses. And I think that's the sort of thing the Planning Commission can debate. Exactly where volatile manufacturing occurs, they can debate that. What products are available, they can debate that and come up with a recommendation that I think we should seriously consider. The same thing goes for greenhouses in residential suburban. I'm not sure exactly, in the bit of the confusion of the afternoon, I'm not sure exactly what the ordinance says. It seems to ban outdoor cultivation in residential suburban, but maybe indoor cultivation in residential suburban, which would address the greenhouse issue that Supervisor Compton rural residential or residential suburban or whatever the zoning is that contains greenhouses. I think that, again, given that we're into a discretionary permit in many instances, is something that we should allow the Planning Commission to consider. But, the overall thought is that if they craft an ordinance along whatever lines that with a discretionary review ends up in cannabis cultivation or manufacturing or whatever it is having negligible impact, as which is what we're aiming for, then the number and the distribution may not make a big difference because the actual impacts of those uses aren't going to be huge. So I just think we've got the one thing about going after that state level CEQA exemption. And let me just add one other thought that I had. The question of dispensaries and delivery services was actually addressed in the trailer bill in terms of what it requires to establish an appropriate delivery service. So we might direct the Planning Commission to look to that.
Yep.
But I think our work here in pointing staff in the direction of the state level CEQA exemption is the important work we've done today.
Got it. Okay.
We did want to speak briefly to the existing delivery services issue. So, in looking at Title 22 and Title 23, we're concerned with land use regulations. And if someone is operating a delivery service from outside of the unincorporated part of the county and delivering to people who live in the unincorporated part of the county, then we don't have a land use permit to issue for that person. And if they're meeting whatever other business license requirements apply to them, then that's fine. If someone is operating out of a base camp or a base location in the unincorporated area of the county and they're operating their delivery service from there, that's a different issue because in our county you need to be a dispensary in order to operate a delivery service from the unincorporated part of the county as things currently exist. So there may be 200 delivery services in the county, but to the extent that those people are delivering from unincorporated locations in the county, they're required to get some kind of a land use permit from us, one that's difficult to get, as we've shown in the past, and they can't do it as a home occupation. So the way it's currently set up, those people are not operating under the law. And I just wanted that to be something that everyone understood. So.
Great. Thank you. So with that, can we get a motion then to receive and file an update related to the draft cannabis and use regulation and provide a direction as necessary?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, just to help us to ask a few questions back your way to clarify on the direction. The board directing us to put some level of time limit renewal on a land use permit, and that land use permit won't traditionally run with the land, but if we will have to issue a land use permit to an applicant on a piece of land. So if that applicant wishes to discontinue that use, then that land use permit would end. Is that the direction? Okay, because that's that helps us, because that's something a little different from what we're used to dealing with. Disallowing in the residential suburban category, outdoor cultivation only, or straight across the board?
Straight across.
That's already in there, so we're not changing.
So not to change that. The use of the state exemption will actually help us greatly. When we use discretionary land use permit, it gives us a great deal of flexibility to build in requests for modification to the rules, to have some nuances for the different type of cannabis activities that would allow us to minimize the burden on somebody coming in, say, to do a testing facility versus some other type of facility on. Is the board in agreement that we should look at volatile production in the industrial category?
Inappropriate, I think we have to look at that.
And again, the discretionary land use permit will give your board a great deal of discretion in setting up the findings that would be required for that from the Planning Commission's recommendation.
Can I ask a question about that? Is residential suburban usually bigger lots than rural residential?
Smaller.
Residential suburban is smaller. Okay.
They're just small.
Those were my questions. Thank you for allowing me to ask them.
Okay. We have clarification.
Just one follow-up, perhaps. The dispensaries, would your board like to see that expanded to non-medical uses?
I think it's going to have to be considered.
Okay.
I think it's something we can or cannot allow. I mean, we can bring it back to you that way, and you can decide at that point. So.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, one other question. So is it your board's pleasure for us to remove all industrial hemp discussion from this and handle that as its own crop?
Separate, I think it's a separate issue, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, my thought there was to make it clear that this ordinance that we've got in front of us does not, but some other way within our land use ordinance and general plan, if necessary, we do
deals with
deal with it specifically.
Yep. Okay.
Right now, as this ordinance stands, if we move it along, it has the cannabis dispensaries in commercial, retail commercial services with them up. That's the way we're sending it to the Planning Commission. Is that good?
Let's let the Planning Commission talk about it.
Well, I'm just saying that if we're giving them this as their base to start off of, unless we had something we really wanted to cut out or add in, it's going that way.
The way it's written in there is medical only, inland only.
Oh, okay. Well, I know that I'm looking at the inland, but it's medical only. So that,
Planning Commission.
Yeah, that is identical to our existing dispensary ordinance.
It's what.
thank you.
Yes, we'll take that on.
And I can, Mr. Chairman, if I can just point out, we did add a concept here to the draft ordinance that's in today's packet that identifies a expedited hearing officer process that is being put into use in other counties, where instead of having these permit violation issues come to your board, they actually come to a hearing officer. They come within 5 days of the notice. It's a super expedited response period. So it would require us to retain a board of hearing officers that could be called upon to serve in that function.